Good afternoon. We're happy to be back in Italy, where actually Future ICT started. Now, humanity is confronted with a number of existential threats, including climate change, financial crisis, conflict and war. And so the question comes up, are there new ways to fix these problems? Big data, for example. And in fact, within just 1 minute, we are sending about 700,000 Google queries, 500,000 Facebook posts. We're shopping, we're moving around. All of that creates data, big data, and of course we can do a lot of good things with that. And governments have discovered that early on, so they started to collect a lot of data, and actually companies too. And Chris Anderson had this dream that if you just had enough data, then basically quantity of data would turn into quality, the truth would reveal itself, the data would tell us what to do. So the idea of the benevolent dictator was born. But I will have to question that. So the idea came up, can we now know everything that happens in the world in real time, in any corner? And even more so, could we predict the future of the world? Could we build a crystal ball? And also, can we actually optimize the world? Can we rule it like a wise king or benevolent dictator? Well, it turns out there are limitations. It's not so easy, and this magic formula that suggests that more data is more knowledge, and more knowledge is more power, and more power is more success, that doesn't always work. It sounds plausible, but it doesn't always work. And so we find, for example, a lot of spurious correlations in the data. As you can see over here, number of serial killers as a function of chocolate consumption. If that would be a causal relationship, it would be very dangerous to live in Switzerland. We would have to put all the people who eat a lot of chocolate in prison just in case. Of course, we're not doing this. This has nothing to do with reality. It just happens to be there because of some random patterns in the data. Now, in fact, it's not so easy to determine causal relationships. There are papers about this. There is currently a replication crisis in science, some people say, and that hasn't been much better since we have big data, because the more data you have, the more patterns are in the data. Just suppose you look into the sky. Of course, there you will see a lot of patterns, but most of them don't have a scientific meaning. And finding powerful causal relationship stays rare, like finding gold. And in fact, in many cases, what you want to do is to separate good and bad risks. Terrorists from good citizens, good and bad risk for an insurance company, for a bank, whatever. But the problem is data clouds are overlapping. So there will be errors, a first kind, a second kind. That means false alarms, alarms that don't go off. We've seen that. There are a lot of people on terror suspect lists. Many of them are innocent. And in some cases, people are on there, but still we can't stop the terror from happening. So these are the kind of problems. And when we saw that actually data would be neutral and objective, this is not the case, it turns out. Algorithms, for example, of Google seem to be discriminating women. There's also a machine bias against colored people. And we haven't seen these kind of problems a couple of years back, but now they become visible. We need to take them into account. In the very same way, has there been a product by 23andMe, you could send a genetic probe, and they would send you a letter predicting your likely diseases. Now, that product was taken off the market. And the question is why? Well, if you send your genetic probe to another company, you would get a different letter with different predictions. some of them would overlap, but some of them would be different. So there is some sensitivity in these big data analysis, and this is a difficulty that we need to account for. In fact, there are some people who should be terribly ill according to their genes, but happen to be healthy. That shouldn't happen if our body would work like a mechanical machine, but it doesn't. So we don't yet understand complex systems. We don't yet understand fully how to make good use of big data. And in fact, it turns out that among the list of the most livable cities in the world, there's none of those big IT nations represented over here. So what are we doing wrong with the use of big data? Would artificial intelligence fix the world? That's the kind of question that we would ask. If big data is not good enough, maybe artificial intelligence can do the job for us. So, in fact, computational power is exploding exponentially. That's what Moore's law says, doubling every 18 months. And since a couple of years, computers are better chess players. In many areas, they're better workers. And they might be better drivers and maybe better doctors too. So this IBM Watson that basically diagnoses 0 diseases based on data and seems to be doing pretty well. It's also very good at answering questions, better at people, those questions that have an answer already at least. So, sounds like a fantastic future. Some people say in 29 years we'll have super intelligent systems and all the problems of the world will be solved by super intelligent systems. Well, then why do people like Elon Musk worry about artificial intelligence? He even says, it's maybe the biggest existential threat for humanity. Well, certainly his worries are not based on observations like this one, that Microsoft chatbot turned into a Nazi within just a day. So if we saw artificially intelligent systems are rational, objective, and all this, don't have all those weaknesses that humans have, these systems can be manipulated as well because they learn, right? So there can be bias. But anyway, so the reason to worry is that some people have asked, could we run society like a giant machine? And in the beginning, that sounds like a great idea. For this, we would just need to know all the pieces that our society is made up of, kind of people, companies, governments, institutions, all this. We would need to know how those pieces behave, how they interact, how they can be manipulated. And in fact, after the automation of production and cars, it seems a natural thing that the automation of society is next. I've been writing a book about this. But there are 2 ways of basically automating society. One is the top-down automation, telling everyone what to do, and the other one would be a bottom-up self-organization, empowered by feedback mechanisms. Now, this is not just theoretical. Companies like IBM, for example, are working on this. This Watson for president was taken seriously by some people working at IBM, and citizens didn't like it so much, so they had to distance themselves from this. Google also wants to reprogram the state. They want to create an operating system for society, not just for your computer, not just for your smartphone, for society, including us. That means programming people's behaviors, right? Just to make sure you understand what that means. And in fact, the military is working on this, CERN is working on this. And why should we be concerned? Well, not only because this hasn't passed science, in the scientific test, this hasn't passed ethical approval, this hasn't passed public approval, all this, also those people behind the concept, like Larry Page have said, there are a lot of things we'd like to do, but we can't do because it's illegal. Well, it turns out in extraterritorial space, you know, there is no law that applies there. I mean, there's some law, but very restricted law. So that's what makes me boring, and that should make you boring most likely. But let me explain how things work over there. So basically, this is based on machine learning. Deep learning in particular, so it's using data that has been collected about all of us. We don't know how much data, but you can be sure that there has been a secret collection of a lot of data about your life and everyone else's life. And these machine learning algorithms are trying to learn what you do, why you do it, and how you can be manipulated. We're living in an attention economy. We're overloaded with information that makes us manipulable, and Google has learned how to do that. They're running millions of experiments every day with us to find out how to make us click a certain link, buy a certain product, pay attention to a certain thing, so they can steer our attention, our emotions, our opinions, our decisions, our behavior to some extent. And they're doing it. And they have quite a bit of power. They have manipulation power in many countries, as you can see, North America, South America, Europe, India, Australia in particular. And these happen to be more or less the countries that are also part of the TISA agreement. And if you look at what people do now, you could really get this impression that we're to some extent already remotely controlled. Now, this has also become interesting for politics. There it's called nudging in combination with big data about us. We call it big nudging. And it's kind of deficient because we don't notice that we are being manipulated. It feels like we've taken a known decision, but in fact our attention, our decision making has been steered. And the science behind it is called behaviorism. It's outdated, it's kind of a mechanical view of human behavior, but they're still trying to condition our behavior. And you know, it goes back to Skinner, who has used these Skinner boxes to condition animals with rewards and punishments. And and the Skinner box that we're living in is called the filter bubble. So there is an information cloud built around us. It's a personalized information cloud that is made to manipulate us. The problem is, you know, it doesn't hurt somehow, but the problem is it becomes more difficult to think out of the box, to be innovative, to come up with those solutions that we need to solve our future problems and problems of today. Would we be punished? Well, I'm afraid so, because this big nudging doesn't fully do the trick. You know, we wouldn't all be slim and healthy and treat the environment nicely. It needs stronger feedback loops to make us do what governments would want us to do, such as personalized pricing. Here you can introduce reward and punishment mechanisms, and if that doesn't help, there is the citizen score, which has been explored in China, for example. And so the point here is that everything you do gets plus or minus points. And that will determine the rates that you have to pay for your loans, and will determine the jobs you can get. It will determine the kind of countries that you can travel to. And so this is pretty much smart, brave new world. Pretty totalitarian. And then, you know, predictive policing comes in, and that predictive policing also takes into account not only what you do, but what your friends do, what your neighbors do, what your colleagues do. And so, you know, there are reasons to worry. The question, would the right kinds of people sit in prison? And here is a quote, you know, by the US Attorney General Eric Holder. He said, "Too many Americans go to too many prisons for far too long and for no truly good law enforcement reason." And this is the statistics, right? It's not Russia, not China, where most people are in prison. It's the United States, you know. Is this our future? I do think our society is at a crossroads. We need to make up our mind how our digital future should look like. It will be a digital future. It will be a database future. Yeah, I agree with that. There's a digital transformation happening, and that could be compared maybe to the Industrial Revolution. It will be as big, it will just happen much faster actually, and it challenges our society, all our institutions. In fact, it may take away quite a lot of jobs. Some people say about 50% of today's jobs within the next 10 years or so. And it's not just a challenge for employees, it's also a challenge actually for companies, because 40% of today's top 500 companies will be gone in 10 years, according to statistics. So we need to think about this transformation, because history has shown that during these transformations, the success principles and the organizational principles of society change. Today's success principles are globalization, administration, optimization, and apparently they're coming to a limit. There was nothing wrong about it, but they're coming to a limit, and now we need to come up with something better than that to get to the next level. And I think in a networked world, that's co-creation, that's co-evolution, that's collective intelligence. We'll see transformations, in particular in the service societies, but I think actually in the next years we'll see economic and societal transformation all over the world, and that will be a huge challenge. So what are the possible scenarios? Quite some worrying scenarios: global war, global pandemics, fascism, communism, feudalism, in a data-driven way, a revolution leading to redistribution, basic income, or democracy 2.0 and capitalism 2.0, something that I'd like to introduce later to you. So I think the first scenarios are not acceptable. We need to do everything to avoid them. And the last scenario seems to be the most promising one. So, true, we'll live in a database society, but there are different versions of this. That's why we need to make up our mind. We could build fascism 2.0, a big brother society. We could build communism 2.0, based on this idea of the benevolent dictator, but I can tell you no dictator is benevolent, and that has a reason, because there's no science that can tell you what's actually the goal function that you should optimize. And that's the issue. That's why complex societies require pluralism to thrive. Then there's feudalism 2.0. Some people call it surveillance capitalism, and that seems to be the version that's around over here. Now, some people, in particular in the Silicon Valley, have recently said democracy is an outdated technology, and that's why we need to get rid of it. A creative destruction is the argument, and they say we want to try something new, even though democracy has created wealth, health, and happiness for billions of people. They say we don't care. We know better what to do now. Actually, I don't believe they do. But we see a transformation of democracies in many countries. In Turkey, it's more or less gone. Poland, more or less gone. France, not in a good condition. Now, these countries don't seem to be a digital paradise. In fact, they're not doing particularly well. I've also been looking into Hungary. Hungary is also a data-driven society. I know the scientists behind this. And so I've been looking into the GDP per capita data, and it turns out Hungary has started as the leading Eastern European country, and now it's last. So it doesn't produce the boost that we would have expected from somebody who thinks he's a benevolent dictator. So I think we need to worry that we might lose what we built over hundreds of years, self-determination, freedom, democracy, human dignity, fairness, pluralism, even peace. And that's why I'm saying stop, that's not the right way of using big data. Yes, we should use big data, but we should use it in a different way. And I'm not the only one seeing it this way. Actually, Cass Sunstein, he actually came up with this idea of nudging, of behavioral influencing people's behavior. He gets quite worried about the use of this technology now. Tim Cook of Apple is criticizing Google and Facebook fiercely. Elon Musk spent $1 billion on OpenAI to make artificial intelligence more democratic and work on behalf of us and not the government. And the Pope said, what's up with you, Humanistic Europe? You defender of human rights, democracy, and freedom. Yes, what's up with us, We really need to change our mind. We need to do things better than we did in the past, so we can do so. Our biggest problems haven't been solved, even though we have more data and better technology than ever. And it's because we're not using it right. And the biggest problem, in fact, is the lack of sustainability. We're living beyond what this planet can offer on the long term. We know that, in principle, since 40 years, Limit to Growth has warned us of this. It's saying there would be, in the future, there would be economic collapse, would be a dramatic reduction in the number of people that can live on this planet. And in fact, it's not looking good. It's not really looking good. Water becomes an issue, phosphorus becomes an issue, nitrogen becomes an issue, and many other resources too. So the question is, what is the future carrying capacity of the world? So, as our problems haven't been solved, there's been quite some money going into public sedation, bread and circuses. That's still the recipe that we are applying today. Barack Obama himself has warned us. This is also a time around the world when some of the fundamental ideals of liberal democracies are under attack. When notions of objectivity and of a free press and of facts and of evidence are trying to be undermined. And in fact, recently you read articles like this, welcome to a fact-free world. So our world is made up of information. We're being deceived. We don't see what's going on behind the scenes. It's like, this was the palace of Republic of the former GDR. You see this reflection of the dome. You don't see what happens behind. And that's actually how reality is created for us, how we perceive it. So the way to produce reflections in our society is by use of media, TV, smartphones, This is what tries to distract us from the real problems. But I do think it's not right to do that, because we have lost a lot of time that we could have spent on finding solutions to these problems. And now we're running out of time. Anyway, we cannot solve our problems with the same kind of thinking that created them, said Albert Einstein. And we need to take that seriously. In fact, back in 2010, we have predicted the cascading effects resulting from the financial crisis that we have seen in the past years. We warned a bit. We said it requires complexity science to solve these issues. They haven't listened to us, and now we're in trouble. In very deep trouble. Now, we need to understand the digital revolution much better. It's true, computational power is exploding exponentially. Moore's law says doubling every 18 months. That's fine, But data volume increases even faster. Every 12 months, we create as much data as in all years before in human history. That's hard to imagine, really. But in any case, this data volume overtakes processing power. That means the gap between those curves becomes even greater over time, and we can process less and less of the data that we have. We need science to decide what data to look at and how to look at it. So science is back. But also we're networking the world, and that creates an explosion of systemic complexity and a combinatorial increase. And that's why actually, even though we have more technology in data than ever, we're losing top-down control, as the World Economic Forum stated basically this January. And that's why we need to focus on the complexity of systems, right? That's what Future ICT recommended. The implication is we need a new control paradigm, a distributed control paradigm, and that means more participation. So what has been forgotten in all those big data systems that governments and companies build is this participatory element. And we need to realize that society cannot be steered like a car. Interaction is changing everything, and it creates often outcomes that you don't want to happen. Nobody wants to happen, in fact, right? These drivers have all the information that they need to drive in a circle continuously. They have good technology, they have an education, a driver's license. They don't want traffic jams to happen. Yeah? Even if you could read the minds of all these people, you couldn't prevent that traffic jam, because it's the interactions that cause that through an amplification and cascading effect. You know, there are many problems of this kind in the world. Most of the unsolved problems are of this kind, that they're small disruptions that are amplified and create cascading effect, and that things get out of control. We've seen that also in the world financial system, right? Lehman Brothers collapsed and created a cascading effect where hundreds of banks collapsed, and that produced costs of hundreds of billions of dollars, in fact. Now, if you would listen to the big nudging people who want to control society and our behavior in the spirit of optimization, you know, then it would be like this, you know, this bird has to go there. And basically the computer would figure out a solution, would tell everyone, you ought to do this, you should do this, and you should do that, you know. I think that's a totally wrong paradigm. It works for companies, but if I don't like the goal function of this company, I go to that company. And that creates diversity and pluralism, and that's what we also need in our society. We need combinatorial freedom that creates combinatorial innovation, right? So we don't need to control people, we need to enable them, guide them, okay, but you know, freedom is important for innovation. We know that, data tell it to us. So we need to have more innovation, not less, and that means we need to create an information, innovation, production and service ecosystem where everyone can contribute with ideas and services and products and innovation. So open data actually is needed to support better decisions of everyone, to enable participation in digital democracy, to create new jobs and means to power the digital economy. And that's why we have started to come up with a platform that illustrates a new big data paradigm. NervousNet came out of Future ICT, the planetary nervous system, an open source distributed platform that you can build with us. You're all invited to do that. And it's using basically our smartphones and other Internet of Things sensors that can be added in to measure the environment together, you know, so we can network our smartphones and other sensors, and in this way create a measurement infrastructure to measure the entire world in a crowdsourced way together. You know. Just, we like to feel comfortable about it, right? So we need a system that we can trust, and that means this should be a web of the people, a citizen web, controlled and managed by the people. And we should have control over the kind of data that's being shared with others. So that's why we take informational self-determination very seriously. You decide what center to open, whether you use the data just for yourself, say for a smart home or smart garden application, or whether you want to share these data. And so you're in control, you know. And you could add actually something like a private personal data store on top. But the most important thing is this is a participatory system, and there's 3 levels of engagement. You can produce data with us, everyone can do that. You can use these data for data analytics to learn something about the world, come up with better decisions. And you can build your own apps. That can be games, that can be services, that can be digital products. So there is a new economy that could evolve over time. Now, numbers that could do a lot of things for us, you know, like can create greater awareness to take better decisions. So can map resources and reuse them. And in fact, we have created an app that's called Swarm Pals to do exactly this. Also, this needs to be further developed. But altogether, you know, the idea is to create compasses for decision makers that can make things visible that we are not aware of or could not even see or hear or feel, such as social capital, reputation, trust, whatever, you know. Then we can do real-time measurement to quantify externalities such as noise, stress, pollution, but also positive things like happiness, cooperation, all this, you know, can measure earthquakes together. And all these kinds of things now become possible. We can create digital assistants that help us to come up with better solutions for our society in a distributed but coordinated way. In fact, Nobel Prize winner Elinor Ostrom showed that self-governance can be efficient if we just have the right kind of design principles. That means the right kind of interactions and institutional boundary conditions. And the idea is not to have one super intelligent system that would tell everyone what to do, but to have something like this, you know, a root guidance system that you can turn on or off. You choose the goal, and it tells you you have a number of options. You know, would you like to minimize distance or greenhouse gases? You choose, then this device helps you to achieve your goal. This is how intelligent systems should work, you know, man-machine symbiosis. We can build these devices to help people to help themselves, to help them each other. For example, in disaster response situations, we could actually add ad hoc networking functionality on top, so our devices could still communicate with each other, even if public telecommunication has broken down. We could build a payment system or something like a small sharing economy on top, so we could still exchange goods in a crisis situation, all this. And we could have systems that make sure people behave responsibly, like reputation systems, qualification systems that decide how much data you can use, what kind of functionality you can access, and all this. And these systems can support situational awareness and interaction and many other things. So, in a complex world, nobody can really understand the entire complexity of this world, and that's why we need collective intelligence. We need to have platforms that help us to bring the knowledge and ideas of many people together. So that calls for online deliberation platforms to make democracy efficient, to put all the arguments on a virtual table, to organize them into different perspectives, and then people sitting around the round table can try to integrate those different perspectives to come up with solutions that work for many stakeholders and many interest groups. So they enable combinatorial innovation. Here it's really important to realize that diversity wins. It's not the best individual solution that wins. It's the combination of the solution, and that's why diversity is important, as biodiversity is, by the way. So this is the essence of digital democracy. It's really that you would integrate many different perspectives to make our society and our economy work from many different points of view. And then, yeah, the economy, of course, is a very important point. Now, see, now we have technology, in particular Internet of Things and blockchain technology and complexity science, to build, finally, a liberal, democratic, participatory, social, and ecological capitalism. It's possible now, and we need to do that, because we have now so much trouble with our economy. Inequality has reached a level that basically slows down economic growth, but we need economic growth, otherwise our economy collapses. Globalization has reached a limit. We're trying to restart the economic engine with billions, trillions even, that we pump into the system. ECB is doing that, the Fed is doing it. It hasn't helped really. Now, some say the solution for the world is monopolies, because that comes with economies of scale, and however, monopolies are not very strong in terms of innovation. They tend to misuse power. There's a too big to fail problem, but still they're pushing into this direction with agreements such as TTIP, and I think it's the wrong way. If you consider complex systems and how they behave, it's not the solution to our problems, it will make it worse. Now the ECB is coming up with ever more desperate ideas, including helicopter money. It would mean to feed in money in a bottom-up way, to put it on your bank account. And actually, that idea isn't too bad. Because if you really want to get back to a path of growth, then we need to unleash the potential of the digital economy. The digital economy is unlimited because it's immaterial. If we don't limit it with wrong kinds of intellectual property rights, with the wrong kind of institutional boundary condition, it's unlimited. But if we just have a fixed amount of money, then for us to do better, there would have to be a redistribution of money from the top to the bottom. That will not happen. So if we want to unleash this unlimited growth, we need to create money, at least some of it, from the bottom, as we create and share data with others, as we do these measurements of the externalities. Now, how good a certain action is for others, for other companies, for the environment. As we do these measurements with NervousNet, for example, and share this data, we would also create money, and that can be done. Bitcoin has shown it's possible to create money in a bottom-up way. But it needs to be multidimensional. We know that complex systems cannot be controlled by one variable. It requires many variables, a multidimensional incentive system to enable you to manage complex systems and to support self-organizing systems, right? So we really need to reform our money system towards one that can support self-organization much better than today. And in fact, I claim that 300 years after the invention of the concept of the invisible hand, now we can make it work with the Internet of Things combined with complexity science. And the point here is to create the right kind of feedback loops to change the interaction mechanisms such that favorable outcomes would happen. And we can do that on many levels. On the individual level, the level of a department, of a unit of a company, we can do that in a household, in a quarter of a city, a region, a nation, the entire world, But the difference here is this leaves degrees of freedom for innovation on the bottom. It's not telling from the top down what everyone should do. You kind of mildly steer the system in the right direction with the suitable kinds of incentives, but you leave freedoms, right? And we've actually shown that this approach is extremely successful. We have managed to get rid of traffic jams with particular driver assistance systems. These are decentralized systems that measure the distance and relative velocity with radar sensors, and then change the acceleration, deceleration behavior of the cars a little bit and get rid of the traffic jam. Now, can do a similar decentralized control of traffic lights in the city. And it turns out, if your traffic flows control the traffic lights rather than the other way around, and you have the right kind of interaction mechanisms, you can improve the performance of your system much beyond the system which is using state-of-the-art top-down control by the traffic center today. And this is because optimization is not the right kind of paradigm for NP-hard problems. It's flexibility and adaptation, right? So this is really important. And for similar reasons, decentralized approaches are also becoming more and more popular in the area of smart grids and in Industry 4.0, where basically the products could talk to the machines and tell them what to do, in a responsive way, and also the products could talk to each other and say, I'm in a hurry, let me overtake, and all these kind of things. But the most important point is really, once we measure externalities and give them a price or a value, if, for example, if waste would have a price, and reusing waste would create an income, then that will create a circular economy, something that we really are in urgent need of because of this impending resource crisis, right? So we need to reuse resources much better than before. And the sharing economy, of course, is part of the solution concept for the resource crisis in the future. That means if we share resources, then we can create a high quality of life for more people with less resources. So, in conclusion, we can build better systems and create a better future by using big data, but in an open, participatory, and fair way. We should use artificial intelligence, yes, but in a symbiotic, in an ethical way that requires value pluralism, values by design, and all this. Yes, we can use incentive systems, but it should be multidimensional, should be used in a bottom-up way, largely at least. We could build an operating system for society, but it should have these opportunities for everyone to feed in ideas and innovation. So it should support self-organization, self-regulation, coordination, and that's the point. And the systems of today, they don't do that to the extent we need it. And yes, we need a new socio-ecological capitalism, and we can build that by combining the Internet of Things with blockchain technology in complexity science. So my vision of the future is this one. It's not one big machine that would represent society, but it's rather a networked, well-coordinated, distributed system of largely autonomous systems. And like to say, if we combine smart technologies with smart citizens, that creates smarter cities and smarter society. So let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have time for one or two brief questions. Anyone?
Over there.
Please, Andrea.
Thank you for this very inspiring talk. But according to you, how far we are from this perspective? I mean, is it difficult to reach, or do you think it's feasible within how many years?
I think we can build this new socio-ecological capitalism, what I call sometimes finance 4.0, and also this digital democracy, which could also be called governance 4.0. We could build that within 5 years' time if governments and companies would engage into this. So we will have enough time, according to the United Nations. We should accomplish the task by 2030. The biggest obstacle, I think, are the old elites. Those are benefiting, who are benefiting from the current system, which is about to collapse, as it's natural in this economic and societal transformation that we are about to see, but you know, they're trying with all the force and all the resources that they have to keep that system alive, and that can end in a very bloody way. You know, it's I am currently extremely concerned about this, but I think, you know, we all need to speak up and tell our governments what needs to be done now, because otherwise people will take control of our lives in a way that will not be good for us and for other people. So we need to give guidance to politics. We need to put sufficient pressure and good arguments on the table, basically, to make the right things happen now.
Yeah. Okay. You have a question?
Well, okay. So practically you answered it more or less. But is there do you have like a practical way of achieving this, of implementing this? Because it seems.
Yeah. I mean, basically, of course, we've been waiting for public support for some time, and we do have some, but we don't have it to the extent that would be needed to push this. You know, there have been much bigger investments into this central top-down control systems that were fine at the time before the Internet of Things and blockchain technology was available. Now we can build better systems, you know, and it's our obligation, our responsibility from a moral point of view to do this, you know, because this is about the life of people, of many people. So we have started to build this in a crowdsourced way. Now, Linux, Wikipedia, OpenStreetMaps are the models. We're engaging with Fab Labs, the maker community. We're engaging, of course, with science all over the world, and we hope that everyone would realize, you know, we don't have to wait, actually. There are enough people, if they just start to build that together, now we can accomplish this task. Remember that WhatsApp has been originally built by just 40 people. It's now being used by more than 1 billion people. So that means there are enough people in the world who could do it. You know, we don't have to wait for 1 billion by the government. Of course, money by the government would help. You know, engagement of the industry with us would help. I still hope it will happen. Yeah, and that the arguments will become clear to people. They will be insightful to understand that the systems that have been built have been making some progress, but they're not good enough to deal with the complexity of the world. And you shouldn't slash that complexity, because that would really destroy a lot of important elements of our society that are needed for it to thrive. And in particular, I'm very worried about this utilitarian approach, where you basically measure everything on a one-dimensional scale, right? That means to project the complexity of the entire world in all its beauty and complexity on one dimension. That can just create societal collapse, you know. So this is the wrong approach. We need to have a pluralistic approach. We need to have a multidimensional approach. We need to allow people to come up with ideas, innovations, and feed it in, because it's obvious that the big companies and politics haven't managed to solve the problems alone. Civil society, science is needed to come up with the solutions to solve our problems.
Okay, so thanks a lot, and I think we move to the next speaker.